I own this company. But for the first 9 months, not a single person in the office knew. Not the CEO, not the CFO, not the head of HR, not even the people who sat beside me every day. On paper, I was just a senior content strategist, a title high enough to get me into certain meetings, but low enough that nobody felt the need to perform in front of me. And that was exactly what I wanted. I didn't buy this company so I could walk in and announce, "From now on, I'm the boss." I bought it to answer a much more uncomfortable question. If nobody knew I was the owner, how did this company actually operate? Because there is one thing most business owners don't like to admit. The moment the boss walks into the room, everything becomes fake. Employees suddenly look busy. Desks suddenly become cleaner. Bad reports suddenly look polished. Weak managers suddenly stand straighter, speak louder, and act like everything is under control. I didn't want the polished version. I wanted the real version. And to see the real version, I had to disappear. The acquisition closed on a Friday. The company wasn't purchased directly under my personal name. Everything went through a holding company. Lawyers handled the paperwork. The finance team handled the transaction. Senior management was only told that the company had a new shareholder, an investment entity, quiet, hands-off, not interested in publicity. Nobody knew the person behind that entity was me. 3 weeks later, I submitted a resume to the very company I had just bought. I still remember the interview. A mid-level director sat across from me and asked, "Why do you want to work here?" I almost laughed. I wanted to say, "Because I just spent a ridiculous amount of money buying this place." But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Because I think this company has strong potential, but there are still a lot of things that can be optimized." He nodded. He had no idea how accurate that answer really was. I got the job. On my first day, I entered the building with a regular employee badge. No luxury car. No welcome ceremony. No assistant. No private office. Just a desk, a laptop, a Slack account, an internal email address, and a chair that made a small squeaking sound every time I leaned back. I liked it, because for the first time since buying the company, I started hearing things a normal owner would never hear. People complained near the coffee machine. They cursed broken processes when they thought no manager was listening. They told the truth after meetings ended. And most importantly, they started saying very expensive things. Nobody even uses that software, but we still pay for it every month. That vendor raised their price twice. I don't think anyone checked. She's really good, but her manager doesn't like her. That project has been losing money forever, but nobody wants to admit it failed. That was when I realized something. The truth about a company rarely lives in the boardroom. It lives in the sentences people say when they think nobody powerful is listening. I created a rule for myself. I called it the third row principle. The first row is where power sits. The second row is where people sit when they want power to notice them. But the third row, that's where people start forgetting they're being watched. In meetings, I always sat farther back. I didn't speak much. I didn't try to prove I was smart. I didn't interrupt. I just watched and listened. I watched who always spoke first, who repeated other people's ideas, who said almost nothing but solved the actual problems after the meeting, who loved taking credit, who loved passing blame, who brought data, who only brought volume. I started seeing the company as a machine. Every person was a component. Every process was a gear. Every bad behavior created friction. And if you watched long enough, you could see exactly where money was being burned. About 3 weeks after joining, I found the first mistake. A software contract was charging the company more than it needed to. The difference wasn't big enough to make the CFO lose sleep. But it was wrong. A pricing tier had been automatically renewed from the previous cycle. I checked everything. The pricing table, the old contract, the number of active users. Then I realized the company was paying for a level of usage it didn't actually need. I could have sent an email. I could have copied the CFO. I could have made sure everyone knew I had just saved the company money. But I didn't. I printed 2 pages, circled 3 lines, then wrote on a sticky note, "Looks like this pricing tier may not match actual usage." No name. No signature. I left it near the finance documents. 2 days later, an email went out. The CFO announced that the finance team had identified an issue in a vendor contract. They renegotiated it. The cost went down. People praised finance. Someone even said, "The finance team has really been paying attention lately." I sat at my desk. and said nothing. That was when I understood something important. Most people don't really want results. They want recognition for results. Those are two different things. I didn't need anyone to know I was right. I just needed the wrong thing to disappear. From that day on, I started hunting for leaks. I created a private file. Only 3 columns. Problem. Value being lost. Person who could fix it. I found one software platform with more than 70 paid accounts. Actual active users? Just over 10. An agency was still billing according to an old scope of work, even though the workload had nearly been cut in half. A support contract had existed for more than a year, and nobody could remember why it had been signed. A failing project was still consuming money because nobody had the courage to say it had failed. Each one looked small. None of them was dramatic enough to become a scandal, but once I added them together, the number became uncomfortable. I called it micro-margin optimization, optimizing the small things. The things people ignore because they say, "It's not that much money." That sentence destroys profit. Every leak is not that much. But what happens when you have 1,000 leaks? A business doesn't always die because of one massive mistake. Many businesses die from thousands of small bad decisions that nobody thinks are worth fixing. And because nobody fixes them, they survive year after year. The interesting part was this. I still hadn't used my real authority. I didn't call the CEO. I didn't order the CFO around. I didn't pressure HR. I simply made sure the right people had a chance to notice the right problems. A benchmark table appeared in a shared folder. A pricing comparison sat next to meeting documents. A short comment appeared in a file. Do we still need all these licenses? A question came up during a meeting. If we remove this cost, does anything actually break? Sometimes the person with authority found the problem. Sometimes they thought the idea was their own. I didn't care, as long as it got fixed. 6 weeks later, 3 contracts had been renegotiated. 2 software tools had been cut. 1 agency lowered its fee. Margins started to improve. Not dramatically, not magically, but consistently. And that's when I learned something many founders take years to understand. Margin is not a concept on a finance slide. Margin is real money. Money the system does not allow to fall through the cracks. After about 4 months, I stopped looking only at expenses. I started looking at talent. And this was much harder. Because money doesn't have emotions. People do. There was a woman on the content team named Maya. She almost never spoke much in meetings. She didn't fight for credit. She didn't understand office politics. If you only watched how she presented herself, you would probably rate her as average. But I started looking at the data. 3 of the highest retention clients had worked directly with her. 2 of the most profitable campaigns that quarter had her fingerprints all over them. Whenever a project got difficult, people called Maya. But during performance reviews, she was rated, meets expectations. Meanwhile, her direct manager was being considered for promotion. So I looked deeper, and I found something that exists in almost every company. One person creates value. Another person tells the story about that value, and the organization starts confusing the storyteller with the creator. That is one of the biggest mistakes in talent management. I had seen the same pattern before. Some people are brilliant at generating ideas but terrible at execution. Some people are amazing at executing a checklist but weak at creating original ideas. If you put someone in the wrong role, the system breaks. Not because they are stupid, because you are using the wrong person for the wrong job. So I stopped asking, who is better? And started asking, what is this person actually good at? Those are completely different questions. Someone can be an incredible specialist and a terrible manager. Someone can be weak at invention but outstanding at execution. Someone can speak beautifully and create very little value. Someone can stay quiet and secretly hold half the system together. If you only watch the loudest person in the room, you will use people badly. I couldn't walk into HR and say, Maya is important. That was too emotional. I needed to turn her value into something the system could understand. So I built a report. Replacement cost, onboarding time, client loss risk, revenue tied to the accounts she touched, retention rate, projects she helped rescue, crisis situations she had stepped into. I didn't write, Maya is talented. I wrote, if this employee leaves, the 12-month economic impact may be several times greater than the cost required to retain her. That is the language companies understand. No emotion, no favoritism, no sympathy, just value. The report moved through an indirect channel. Then it reached HR. A few weeks later, Maya got a raise. Sometime after that, she was moved to a team that fit her better. Her former manager lost direct control over her. Maya never knew who had pushed for it. I still sat a few desks away. She still greeted me every morning like nothing had changed. I never said a word. By the 6th month, the company was improving. Costs were down. Employee retention was up. Margins were better. Teams were blaming each other less. Processes were becoming clearer. Strong people were being moved closer to the work they were actually good at. But the more I saw, the lonelier it became. Because when you only see one piece of the system, you can blame someone else. Sales blames marketing. Marketing blames product. Product blames sales. Managers blame employees. Employees blame the process. But when you see the entire system, you realize everyone is partly right and partly wrong. A lot of problems don't begin with people. They begin with incentives. If the KPI rewards bad behavior, even good people can start behaving badly. If value creators and value destroyers are treated the same, good people leave. If a manager gets promoted because they speak well, instead of because they deliver results, the company creates a class of professional performers. So I stopped trying to fix people one by one. I started fixing the system, and I learned something else. There is no single management model that works everywhere. The same process can produce different results with different people. The same structure can succeed under one manager and fail under another. You have to test teams, test structure, test systems, then keep what produces the best result. A company that runs only on belief eventually dies from illusion. I thought I could stay invisible forever. I was wrong. In a modern company, nothing truly disappears. Emails have logs, files have edit histories, accounts have timestamps, systems have audit trails, HR has timelines, IT can trace access. A document can pass through 4 people and still lead back to the first person who touched it. By the 8th month, my footprints started overlapping. Someone in IT noticed that my account appeared around several sensitive internal files. HR noticed I was strangely close to several major staffing changes. Legal noticed a few reports had reached outside advisors before the relevant teams had formally acted. Each event by itself proved nothing, but when you connected them, a pattern appeared. One Monday morning, I received a message. "Can you come to the meeting room on the 12th floor at 9:30? I knew. Time was up. 3 people were waiting inside. It, and my direct manager. A stack of documents sat on the table. The moment I sat down, HR said, "We have a few questions about your access to internal data." IT pushed a log toward me. "Can you explain why your account appears in these files?" I looked at it, file by file, timestamp by timestamp, access by access. They had done a good job, better than I expected. I said, "Because I was analyzing some operational issues." HR asked, "Who asked you to do that?" I stayed quiet. "No one in your management chain assigned this work to you." I nodded. "That's correct." The mood in the room changed. My manager became visibly uncomfortable. "Then why did you do it?" I looked at the clock. 9:42. I said, "At 11, everyone will have the answer." HR frowned. "What does that mean?" I stood up. "I can't explain more at this level. That is probably the worst thing you can say if you are just an employee." And that was the moment they became convinced I was involved in something serious. I left the room, went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and looked around the office one last time as an ordinary employee. At exactly 11, the entire company received an invitation to an emergency all-hands meeting. No agenda. No explanation. Rumors exploded immediately. Are we being sold? Is the CEO leaving? Are layoffs coming? Was there a security breach? I entered the room last, still wearing the same clothes I wore every day, still sitting near the back. The CEO walked onto the stage. Beside him stood the lawyer representing the holding company. The first slide appeared. Corporate ownership structure, parent company, subsidiaries, legal entities. Then the lawyer said, "We want to clarify the identity of the company's ultimate beneficial owner." The slide changed. My name appeared. The room went silent. The person beside me turned and stared. Maya stared. HR stared. My direct manager looked almost frozen. I stayed seated for a few seconds. Then I stood, walked from the back of the room to the stage. I didn't give a long speech. I simply said, 9 months ago, I acquired this company. I could have walked in on day one as the owner, but if I had done that, I would only have seen what people wanted me to see. What I needed was the truth. The next slide appeared. Operating costs. Down. Next slide. Margins. Up. Next slide. Employee retention. Up. Next slide. Revenu per client. Up. Final slide. Internal valuation. Nearly 3 times higher than when the acquisition closed. People started whispering. I said, these results were not created by me alone. Everyone in this room created them. What I did was remove friction. I looked at finance. They renegotiated the contracts. I looked at HR. They changed how the company retained talent. I looked at the operations teams. They fixed the processes. Most of the time, they didn't even know I was involved. I paused. And that doesn't matter. After the meeting, someone asked me, why didn't you take credit? That question stayed with me for a long time. When I was younger, I wanted my name everywhere. I wanted people to know I was smart. I wanted to win arguments. I wanted praise. When something worked, I wanted everyone to know it worked because of me. Eventually, I realized that is not power. That is hunger for validation. Someone who truly owns the outcome does not need to own the spotlight. If the company makes more money, I win. If a great employee stays, I win. If finance thinks they discovered a problem themselves but the business saves money, I still win. If someone else gets the praise but the system improves, I still win. That is the difference between working to be seen and working to create results. After everyone knew who I was, I finally had the authority to intervene openly. But the first thing I did was reduce my own presence. I didn't want to become the company's new bottleneck, because many founders suffer from the same disease. Every decision must go through them. Every problem must be brought to them. Every team must wait for them. Everything revolves around them. And then they proudly say, this company cannot run without me. Wrong. If the business cannot function without you, you have not built a business. You have built a giant job for yourself. My goal was the opposite. I wanted the business to operate well. Even if I disappeared, we created clearer dashboards. Unusual expenses were flagged. Contracts approaching renewal were reviewed. Important employees were evaluated with data. Teams were allowed to test new ideas, but every experiment had to be measured. Nobody could say, I feel like this is better. Show me the number. Nobody could say, that team does it this way, so we should copy them. Test it in your own team. That became one of my strongest beliefs. There is no universal formula. One team may need a manager who is strong at generating ideas. Another may need someone obsessed with execution. Some teams need creators and operators separated. Other teams can combine both roles in one person. You have to test based on the people, the team, the structure. You cannot copy someone else's system and pray it works. A strong business is not a business that never makes mistakes. A strong business is one that detects mistakes faster and fixes them faster. 1 year after I had joined my own company as an employee, I was barely involved in daily operations anymore. Not because I stopped caring, because I finally got what I wanted. The system could run. Teams could make decisions. People were placed in roles that fit them. Problems had mechanisms that brought them to the surface. Nobody had to wait for the owner to accidentally notice. I could leave for weeks. No crises. No hundreds of messages asking for approval. No line of people waiting for me to sign everything. And that was the moment I finally felt like I truly owned the company. Not the day I signed the acquisition documents. Not the day the lawyer revealed my name. The day the business no longer needed me in daily operations. A few months later, the company moved offices. While cleaning out storage, an employee pulled out an old folding chair. It had once been used in a small meeting room. I had sat in that chair many times. He asked, should we throw this away? I looked at it, and I remembered the beginning. A sticky note. A spreadsheet. A laptop. One person nobody paid attention to. I remembered the meetings where I knew the problem but stayed quiet. The moments when someone else received praise for a change I had started. The afternoons I watched the whole company without anyone realizing the person in the room actually owned it. I said, no, keep it. He asked, why? I smiled. So I remember where real power begins. I used to think power meant walking into a room and everyone knowing your name. Later I realized That is only attention. Real power is changing outcomes without needing to stand in the center of the stage. It is making a system better without needing your name attached to it. It is putting the right people in the right roles, using the right data with the right incentives, and being disciplined enough to understand that not everything needs your hands on it. If your company collapses because you take 1 week off, don't be proud that you are important. You do not own the system. The system owns you. The highest form of power is not being everywhere. The highest form of power is building something that continues to operate correctly when you are no longer in the room. And sometimes, everything begins with something very small. A chair in the third row, a sticky note, one line of data, and one person patient enough to notice what everyone else ignored. No applause, no spotlight, just results.